bottom-up information, and when you mix the two, it's really good. So I basically applaud you guys for working with that combination of community input and feelings and wants, and then the actual data. It's a good mix. I'm in the middle of putting together some of the 2019 census information, and just have a couple interesting things to share tonight. After I piece it all together, I will come back and speak another time with a more formal presentation, but just a couple interesting things. As of the end of 2019, Sammamish had about 66,700 people. This is all according to the ACS 2019 data. But what I found interesting was 20.1% of the residents were between 40 and 49. 14% of the residents were between 50 and 59, and 13.3 were between 60 and 85. I intend to go back to the 2000 data and the 2010 data to take a look at some trends on that. Something else interesting is that 9.7% of our 21,000 households, am I done on time? No. Okay. 21,500 households as of 2019, according to ACS. See here, 9.7% were one-person households, 28.5% two-person households, and 24.9% three. So 1, 2, and 3-person households make up around 65% of our households, and 1 and 2-person households make up around 38%. I think those things matter, as the general trend appears to be a gentle aging of the median age in Sammamish. Again, I need to go back and contrast that to 10 and 20-year-old data. I'll come back with that information. But in summary, I do think good data mixed with, a community vision and, desires combined is a great combination. That's my comment for this evening. Have a good meeting.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, tonight's, let's see, we will say that our senior needs discussion with providers is a much better saying than this is a senior panel. So, okay. Okay, I'd like to begin here to introduce our commission purpose and our members. Just as a general overall view, the commission makes recommendation to the City Council on topics such as development of human services in Sammamish, determination of human services priorities, human services grants and funding requests, emerging human services issues or concerns. I'd like to introduce our commission members, do it in kind of the position order. Jody? Nushina? You've been quiet tonight. Stan? Okay. Terry?
I'm here.
Julie? I haven't known you guys to be so quiet. Rich? Okay. And me. Now there's Mike, MS, hiding off the outside doing all our technical stuff. He's a senior financial analyst or management. What's the title, Mike?
Close, senior management analyst. And it's very nice to meet you all. Thank you for joining us.
And Rita? Rita, who knows everybody? Everybody should know Rita. She's a very important person for us. Okay.
And hello, everyone, and thank you all for attending.
And I'm sure that Linda and Vicki and Sally know all about this. Our background, the Human Services Commission completed a year-long professional citywide health and human service needs assessment with the Burke team beginning in 2017 and continuing in 2018 on identifying strategic plans, which were presented and approved by our City Council. The 5 priority areas include basic needs, This is alphabetical: cultural inclusion, domestic violence, mental wellness, and seniors. And as we discuss these needs along the time, we've had transportation and affordable housing concerns mixed in here. And these more or less belong to the Planning Commission and the city's Community Development Department. Okay, I'm going to ask everybody, hopefully, to leave your cameras on unless you're stepping away. And that's sort of like the distractions of coming and going with teams drives me nuts. All right. Senior needs discussion with providers. Here we go. I'd like to have you introduce yourself and your organization. Linda, would you like to start?
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your panel today. I'm Linda Woodall. I'm the Executive Director of Eastside Friends of Seniors. We are a Sammamish-based nonprofit that mobilizes volunteers to help seniors in our community.
And Sally Farrell?
Yes, good evening. I'm Sally Farrell. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I am representing Sammamish seniors. It doesn't mean the seniors at the high school. It means those of us who are older adults in our community. So you've heard of Sammamish seniors already, so I don't think I need to go into a long explanation on that, but it's great to be with you. I have a background in the field of aging, and I'm a volunteer of significant service.
Well spoken. And Vicki.
Hi, I'm Vicki Sosi. Can you hear me? This is my first time on Teams. Okay. I work at the YMCA, the Sammamish YMCA. I've had been there about 21 years with a little break for COVID in there and just am getting back. But I work extensively with the AOA crowd there, the active older adult crowd, keeping them busy and active. And I really enjoy that group. I'm glad to be here and look forward to learning some things and adding some insight from my end if needed.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, we're going to start with the COVID question. Have you experienced any changes in the types of calls you are receiving due to COVID? Anybody who wants to speak here?
I can start. So I'm not sure that it was the type of calls we received, but it was the outreach that we did with seniors that were serving and seniors we had previously served. And the big difference was the social isolation. That was kind of the number one thing about COVID. Before, people would never call us or rarely called and said, I'm lonely. But the social engagement would happen as part of a service delivery strategy. We actually had seniors calling us. Approximately 95% of those we serve live alone. Our seniors were very cautious about staying safe. And so they were not leaving their home. And so as we helped them traverse the needs that they had, there was also that need for social engagement. And it literally had people call up and say, I just want to see a real person. I appreciate talking to people on the phone, but I want to see a real person. So that's number one. So I'll start with that. I'll let someone else jump in and then I can add on.
Well, as far as, excuse me, as far as Sammamish seniors go, we don't take a lot of incoming calls, but, we hear anecdotally that the issues were social isolation, as you said, Linda. And in response to that, we created as many virtual activities as we possibly could with the volunteers that we had. And so we are continuing to do that to this day. So we had met, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4 times in person as we launched Sammamish Seniors. And then voila, when COVID hit, that just created a need at a different level. So we knew people were going to be isolated. And so our option was to engage them virtually. And that's been somewhat successful. I think, as we go forward, we'll develop some different techniques in reaching out. How about you, Vicki?
Yeah, we don't get calls. It's kind of the same thing with the Y. I have a walking group that we've been walking together for years as part of the Y, and I got that kicked back up, not part of the Y, but as I was on furlough, and they are so eager to get out. And this group is just an amazing group of people. They attend classes, they took their chairs to the parks and would sit and talk at a social distance, and they took really good care of themselves. And so I was glad to see that. I counter that kind of the same thing. My mom is in Spiritwood down the way with dementia, and that isolation just did her in. I mean, you could just see it tank, and it's interesting to see the two sides, ones that are actually reaching out to do it and the ones that are locked in their room. And it's just awful. So.
If we have follow-up questions to our panelists as we go, please feel free to open up.
Sure. This is Rich. Sally, you had mentioned doing virtual. Have you run into a lot of problems or difficulties with technology challenges working with older adults? Hey, I really would like to join this, but I don't know how to make Windows or Teams work. Is this a big problem?
Actually, we haven't had any response. I think that seniors in Sammamish, older adults, are pretty tech savvy. And so no, we did not. Joyce, you may be able to share anything, but anecdotally, I don't have any responses from anyone who wasn't able to join us. And we used mostly the Zoom platform, which is extremely easy to use.
Right.
And that seemed to be very helpful. So, but thanks for asking that question, Rich, because I think in other communities that would be true.
Well, I'm glad to hear that we're not having it, but like you said, I'm sure there were other places where it is a much more of a challenge.
The one thing that I would add to that is that the Sammamish seniors, because their engagement was highly online, there are a group of seniors who don't have tech skills, don't have access, or are not comfortable to technology. So the Sammamish seniors is, the outreach was really positive to a group of people. There's another group of people for which that wasn't even an option, either by choice or by not being able to reach out to them and say, are you, finding the means to get them connected. So.
Question to Vicki, how about the Y? Because they changed a lot of things to being able to look at the fitness options any old time. Did that work well?
That worked fairly well. I know they were making calls to seniors as well early on. And again, I've been gone for 18 months. I'm just getting back in, so I'm not exactly up to speed with that. But they did their best to reach out. They did do some virtual training, and I understand more of that will be coming. Apparently, we're going to have cameras coming down in the classrooms. You can do your class and be online at the same time, and record it for people to be able to use it. I think that was really helpful. We're still really shy with people coming back, especially exercising with a mask on in a indoor setting. So I think that is super helpful. I think it got a lot of use from that. I don't know necessarily the age group between the moms and the seniors in there, but it got used frequently from what I understand. It's a nice way to make contact.
Yashina?
Yeah, so what tactics and approaches do you use to do outreach? Because as you've said, seniors are typically very isolated. So what are some ways in which you proactively try to do outreach?
Well, for Sammamish seniors, our outreach is mostly from a database that we put together as we were forming Sammamish seniors. So we have about, I think, between 250 and 300 individuals who are on that list. And that is a challenge for us because there's no specific senior communication channel for anything. And I think that I have some ideas about how we might be able to do that in the future. But I think it's one of our biggest challenges. You know, I don't know if you drove by when we had our opening, but we had big posters out along 228 so that hopefully as many people as possible could be notified that we were starting to form.
No newspapers helped, huh? Yeah. Julie?
My question is for Linda. I was just curious about how you mentioned, the outreach that you were doing to your clients. How did that change in the pandemic? I mean, I'm assuming you had to, buy masks and things like that, but what changes did you have to make as you were reaching out to people?
That was a great thing. The first thing that we did is we literally called everybody who was either an active client or had been a client in the last 3 years, just to check in on them to see how they were doing, if they had any needs. For instance, with so many people being living alone, we wanted to make sure they had access to food. We had historically, what we would do is take clients to the grocery store. As you may know, that most of us outlive the time we should be driving by about 10 years. So the majority of our clients no longer drive, or they drive very locally. And so, we pivoted our programs to be able to accommodate those realities. And then, so that was kind of the outreach piece of what we did. And then we pivoted our programs to, to do telephone buddy programs. And Julie, I want to apologize because I've forgotten all your question. So what was it? I'm going to let you tell me your question again.
That's okay. I mean, that was mostly, and how did you have to change? Like you said, you were taking clients to do grocery shopping. Did you do the shopping for them, and that's, more time consuming?
Yeah, we did porch drop-offs with the support of, so we received some generous support from both the city of Issaquah and the city of Sammamish, and we created COVID care packages that included masks and gloves and disinfectant, and actually there were some treats and some, puzzle books and some fun things in there as well. And we had volunteers who did porch deliveries of those. We also had COVID care packages for our volunteers who might be interacting with a client, because one of our number one services is volunteer transportation, and the need for medical care did not go away. There was a decrease, of course, initially as people put off medical appointments and doctors canceled it, but people still had critical medical situations happening, cancer diagnoses where treatment couldn't wait. A lot of older adults have eye disease that needs treatment, or the result is you go blind. So we made sure that we try to mitigate exposure. So for instance, someone going for cancer treatment, typically if someone goes like 3 days a week for cancer treatment, it could be 3 different persons. We tried really hard to, and our volunteers worked with us to decrease the number of people they came in contact with, those kinds of things. So I will say that obviously everybody's been catching up on their medical appointments, and we are busier than ever right now, and that need to go out. And plus, with the vaccination, our clients are feeling more confident about doing their own, going to the grocery store. I mean, so after more than a year, they were so excited to be able to go to the grocery store and pick out their own food. And we work closely with our other service providers to make sure there was access to food. And I think there's a question coming up about unmet needs or maybe learnings from the pandemic, because I have a few of those that I'll share a little bit later. But yeah, and I'm pleased to be able to say not a single one of our active that we served in their home contracted COVID. I mean, we did have a few people die, but they didn't have COVID. So just because, the average age of the people we serve is 85. So unfortunately, that's a reality of our service.
Nashina, did you have another question?
Sorry, I should have put my hand down.
Jody?
Yeah, I wanted to get back to the outreach question to Sally. Sally, you mentioned that you have a database of 250 to 300. Is that, so does that mean you reach out to them by email or by phone or by mailings on your database? What mode of communication do you use to those 300 folks?
We exclusively use email because of we're an extremely small core of volunteers who met to start Sammamish Seniors, and because we had to close down, that central core of folks didn't expand, and also everyone on our list has email, so it seemed like the easiest. And we do a weekly newsletter. We have speakers on Wednesdays, community speakers. Several of the City of Sammamish employees have been part of that series. So we have developed a weekly newsletter, and it goes out to the full database, and that's our main source of outreach. Telephone calls, I thought about it, but frankly, I was inundated with other things. And many of our core volunteers also during COVID. So many of us have families in the area. That's the reason we still live here. It's not particularly affordable for us to stay here, but if we have family in the area, we make it happen. So I'll just share, I'm a low income senior. And so I feel the effects of living in a community that is one of the wealthiest communities in the state. So yes, phone calls would have been great.
Yeah, Jody, there were over 200 that came to the open house, which was the first Wednesday in February 2020. And it was a very stormy, rainy day. And we heard from many people who didn't show up because they couldn't find a parking space. We overfilled Safeway lot, the Boys and Girls Club, and the Presbyterian Church, and across the street at Great Clips. And people just didn't want to walk any further. The next 3 weeks, we had over 70 people arriving. So it was pretty darn good. The newsletters also go out to the faith communities, hopefully for them to spread to their senior populations and their congregations. And then we have gathered names and emails since that time, primarily because in March this year, we got permission from the city to be able to provide information about the upcoming sessions in the Friday e-news that goes out. And so we average about 3 or 4 new people that come in wanting the link to that session. And at that time, we also suggested if they would like to get on our regular data emails and all, let us know. So that's probably 300, as Sally mentioned. The next question here was something about falls in their homes.
Chair, Commissioner Gunno is requesting to speak.
Oh, okay, good. I just don't see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The last time we got together and discussed senior issues, one of the things that came up was the expense in Sammamish for seniors to be able to get food. You know, making a decision, do I buy my medication or do I get food? Is that still an issue? Is that still coming up? Are we tapping into the food banks more? What are we doing? Are they aware? Like, I just became aware of property tax break that was available for my wife and I. And it was amazing, the reduction in property tax that we got. So that was my curiosity. Anybody familiar with, do I eat or do I get my drugs?
Well, I I would like to respond to that first, if that's okay with Vicki and with Linda. That was sort of my specialty when I was working in the field of aging. I worked as the national trainer for a project for the National Council on Aging in Washington, D.C. Our project was called Benefits Checkup, and it's no cost, no personal identification revealed resource that can give anyone in the United States information by their zip code and their date of birth, any particular program that they would be eligible for. In fact, I just went on earlier, let me see if I can find it. I just went on earlier today to just do another sample. No, I think it was here, maybe. Well, anyway, so I pretended that I was a low-income senior living in 98075. And I said that as a single widowed woman, I was had between $2,000 and $3,000 a month income. It also asks you for your assets, that sort of thing. But it came back to me with a report that said, and this was done within 20 minutes, a report that gave me the option of looking into 62 different programs and benefits that I could have as an older adult in my zip code. So the project started quite a long time ago, and at this point, 9,359,000 people have found over $40 billion worth of benefits through that program. No cost, easy to use, and Stan, I would recommend it to you. It's just benefitscheckup.org. It's a national nonprofit. And it's like, for agencies, it's like having a social worker on staff, because to find that many benefits for a person by their zip code and their age would take hours and hours of research.
I was amazed. I was amazed on the King County tax, or the Washington State property tax. Previously, it was a deferment. Now it's an actual reduction. So you don't have to worry about paying it back with interest. Big benefit for, people like me on a fixed income now that I retired.
I was going to say, I'm going to hold this up. It comes with a table of contents, and it's because it's an electronic document that you can save to your files. Then you just you can click on each name of each benefit, and it'll take you to that page in the document, so that if you're not interested in certain things. And one of the things that did come up, in which I also do receive, is the property tax deferral for senior citizens. So.
Hi, Rita, this is Rich. Is it possible to kind of keep track of all this is great information so that maybe we can make it available? I mean, I'm learning a lot, the benefits, and I didn't even know about that tax deferment. So I'd love to know if these resources, we can make them available. I'm sure a lot of people would be very interested.
Yeah, because one of the things Stan mentioned was food, and for me, the resources that came up under that topic were Washington Basic Food Program, Elderly Nutrition Program, either congregate or home delivered, and Emergency Food Assistance Program, and then Feeding America network of food banks. So, amazing that I could find those things in 20 minutes and I didn't have to contact an information and assistance, although Sound Generations, who is our aging and disability services, they're really fantastic. They use Benefits Checkup.
So Sally, what is the age limit for most of these benefits, age eligibility? Is it 55 and above?
It depends on the particular benefit. They vary, but I always tell people if they're 50 or older, or if they have a disability, anyone 18 or older, if you have a child with a disability who's living in home, there may be resources you don't even know about. So the ages vary, but typically I say people, if you're 50 or older, give it a whirl.
So
learning.
I want to add a couple of things. So Sally, such great information. Benefits Checkup is such a resource for anybody who has internet access or a family member with internet access. And that's often the barrier, is that a lot of folks are unable to find it because they don't have that access. During the pandemic, really appreciative of the city of Sammamish and the food banks, the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank and HopeLink, they collaborated to allow the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank to serve Sammamish residents. And one of their programs is, they call it Groceries to Go, which is a mobile food delivery program. And we were able to help several people who would traditionally go to a food bank, or who, because of circumstances related to COVID, who never considered a food bank, to be able to take advantage of that program. And so that was a wonderful thing. One of the great things that happened during COVID was many of the social service agencies, we collaborated together to find out who was doing what about what across all the age spectrum. So I think there was better collaboration across the pieces. Sally talked about the property tax. It is actually, it's not a deferral. You actually get a reduction in your property taxes. It's been one of those things that the folks have tried for years to get enough information out there. We actually had the King County Assessor at our fundraising luncheon in 2019 specifically talking about that program. And so that was, because the goal is to get people to utilize that. So we are very fortunate that we are in a state where that's in King County in particular, where that is a great value, and a lot of the other resources that are there. So there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of resources, and the key resource I want to point people to is the 211 system. So 211 is a 3-digit dialing like 911, but it's for Health and Human Services. And so during business hours, you can dial 211 and say, what are the food resources? So if you don't have computer access, what are the food resources? I live in this area, and they can tell you those details, or whatever the situation is. And they're professionals, professional information referral specialists who can help people identify the different resources, and the resources are for people of any age. But I think it's particularly valuable to older adults who may not have computer access, but know how to talk on the phone. And the problem with all resource information is that people, it can be in front of you, but until you need a resource, you don't see it and you don't know where to look. So that is a key thing that happens, whether or not you need a disease-specific information, or if you need food, or you need other things. And the one problem with a food insecurity is that people are embarrassed. When I used to work for United Way, and one of the things when we looked at the demographics was that people would travel to a food bank outside their local area, so because they didn't want their neighbors to see them. And so that was across all cultures. So the food bank that was serving the Hispanic community was highly utilized by the Asian community. So it was a very interesting. It was very interesting. So people are very proud, and food insecurity is a huge problem among older adults. And someone had asked about the issue about having to choose between food and medications and such. Now the challenge is the choosing between food, medications, transportation. I mean, that's one of the values of the volunteer transportation program we have, is that it keeps our seniors from having to make those difficult decisions about, do I buy food or medicine, or do I pay for taxi or Uber, which is super expensive. And I can give you an example of a Sammamish client that we provide transportation to. She and many of our seniors in Sammamish are house rich and very low income. And she needed to go to Overlake for an MRI. And so if she had to pay the $75 each way, it would take an Uber to take her to Overlake. She would not be able to buy food. So it's because Uber and taxis, they are kind of on demand, and what is the going rate for wherever you're going. For going during, if an hour trip, because her appointment was at 4, the Bellevue, yeah, from Sammamish, it is difficult. So that exists. So there's different mitigations, but it's a whole picture of medication, food, and transportation.
And Linda mentioned that people are embarrassed sometimes by, sharing information. We used to recommend that if someone had the ability to get themselves to a library or a public place where there was access to computers, benefits checkup can be used from public computers, and because there's no private information shared, and so they still get a tailored report at the end. And they can send that, you can email that to yourself if you have email, or if you don't have email, you know someone who does, you can email it to another person. So, because a lot of times people don't want to share what their assets are, what their personal financial situation is, so.
And Sally, that's a great point, because many seniors who are have some basic computer skills but don't have a computer did utilize, and people of all income levels relied on the access at the library. I know once when I was between jobs where I didn't have internet access, I went to the library to do job searches and to check my email. So yeah, so that's very true. So thank you for bringing that up. And so libraries have been closed most of the last 18 months or 16 months. Yeah.
I think I want to skip to the question is, what can we do to make Sammamish a livable and vibrant community where older adults can age in place effectively?
So Joyce, I think we're on the right track, and we got kind of moved to the side because of COVID. But I think one of the barriers that seniors in Sammamish have is that they don't have any place to congregate. Prior to COVID, I was AARP they do free movies that they use different theaters for seniors, right? And so I went with a friend because I am an older adult myself, and we were at the Issaquah Highlands Theater on one of the AARP, and the people behind me were from Sammamish, and they were talking about not having any place to congregate in Sammamish, and how fun this was that they, that there was something to do. So anyway, I'm just going to throw that out, is that is a huge missing piece of our community.
Others? Sounds like our best benefit is the benefit website there.
Hi, this is Rich again. And one of the things I've heard from a number of seniors is that a senior center would be something that would be greatly appreciated within our community. Is this something that you think it would be, we should be looking at?
I would say absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. I am just so excited that we've started. We planted a seed for it. There's still a lot of work to be done, and as you know, when you build an organization, it takes perseverance, it takes community support, it takes the whole gang getting together and just saying, we can do this. Other communities have done this. It's been proven that it's been done. We just have to find the right pathway to do it. And so I absolutely, unequivocally, we need a place for seniors to gather. And one of the things that we saw when we did start Sammamish Seniors, and we were able to meet for 4 different weeks, was that there is such a diversity in the demographics of older adults in Sammamish, because a lot of us are here because our children live here. A lot of us are here because we've lived here for 20 or 30 or 40 years. And, you know, where are we going to go? I mean, all housing is really a challenge. The cost of housing is a challenge for seniors. And so we've, you know, we need a place for seniors. And, you know, I was just looking at the numbers, Paul, that you gave. And the, well, first of all, you know, I think the wisdom keepers of our community are those who started the city of Sammamish. You know, they're in that older adult population now. And I'm sure that, you know, as we look at the demographics changing, I calculated the 50-year-olds. Now, if you're 50 years old or about there, I have children about that age, and you know, they're thinking, oh, I have lots of time. But you know what? By the time we really get off the ground with a Sammamish Senior Center, they're gonna be eligible for membership in the Sammamish Seniors. So, but 27.3% of us in our community, over 1/4 of our community, is 50 and older, and that's the demographic that we really need to be looking at. You know, we do have a lot of people. You know, well, I would say not a lot of people. I don't know what the demographics, I'd love to see the demographics from 80 to 95. So Paul, if you can get those for me, I would love to have those. But yeah, that's a big percentage of our community. And, you know, with time, we're all getting older.
Julie?
I also think that demographic information is really interesting. And I mean, I'm clearly in that 50 category as well, and not planning to move for a while. I mean, we like it here. It's expensive all around us. And, you know, to get closer to the city or something like that is even more expensive. So, and with COVID, you know, we don't really want to downsize at this point. So I do think, and a lot of people are in that similar situation. So Sammamish will continue to just get older. My question was, I guess for Sally, in the interim, without a place to gather, what are the plans for the Sammamish seniors to start getting back together?
Well, you know, we beg and we seek. No, I'm just kidding there. You know, collaboration with other organizations. You know, the Boys and Girls Club was very, you know, gracious in the beginning. That was, we met there once a week, and that seemed to be quite a successful situation. It wasn't perfect because it was one big room, and so it was difficult to have different programs going on. But, you know, if we look at the success of the senior centers in all the communities that touch Sammamish, they have really successful programs, and they've built on those successes. There's a National Association of Senior Centers. There are 11,000 senior centers in the United States. And so, you know, collaborating with another organization to get lay our foundation. We're looking at some options with Sammamish seniors, and we're not going to stop. We'll keep looking until we find the right fit. We've looked at going out on our own as a 501c3, and with COVID, that just didn't make sense for us to do that right now. So collaborating with an organization that we can, you know, I would say City of Sammamish, but I know that's, you know, that's not in the cards at the moment. But, you know, a lot of cities do it eventually, and it's very, very successful, and people are really happy. And if we make up 25% of the population, that makes it possible to happen.
Linda, can you talk to the Issaquah process of the senior center and how it is now?
Certainly. So, so many of you are probably aware that currently the city of Issaquah is running the senior center. It had been run by private groups previously. There was, I'm going to call it an unfortunate situation in which which it didn't work out, shall we say. There was restraining orders, misuse of funds, things like that. So the city took it over. And in 2019, the city was debating what should we do about it. They did a call for proposals and asked for organizations to who are interested in running the senior center to present a letter of interest. My organization did provide that letter of interest. We ultimately decided that didn't make sense for us, and there was strong feeling from the community as well, because there were trust issues and people were having a good experience with the city running the senior center, that it was a good way to go. And so the city of Issaquah, there are many cities in Western Washington and probably across the state of Washington. I know many in Western Washington where the city is the primary, it's actually a service provider. Issaquah is run out of the Parks Department, and they're very fortunate in that they have a site, a dedicated site for a senior center. And it's a very thriving senior center, even in the time of COVID. So many senior centers who have a dedicated site have been able to do some outdoor programming. And there's lots of examples, but in reality, having and I'm not saying this is the right thing for Sammamish, but one of the things that is very clear is that when the local government is a key backer of the senior center, that it takes a lot of the infrastructure is better, and where senior centers still have to raise money for various things, it just is, and there's some accountability, and there's someone, there's a different level of accountability. There are many great senior centers that are run by nonprofit organizations. Issaquah just ran into some folks who took it over who were not ethical and lied and cheated and stole.
Redmond and Bellevue and Seattle and Renton are all run through the Parks Department.
Yeah, and Bellevue was an interesting one because they had a dedicated senior center, and they identified that they were greatly underutilizing their facilities, and they merged into a community center. It was very interesting because initially the seniors were all up in arms about how horrible this was going to be, and when it actually happened, it wasn't traumatic at all. The seniors still had the primary programming during the day. They extended, the programming during the, during the day to have youth activities and family activities. So the primary seniors, the Bellevue Community Center is located in, what is it, the
148th.
148th. I can't remember what you call that area.
Bellevue.
Which is a very diverse, which is also a very diverse community. On the most part, because Microsoft, you have a lot of Microsoft employees who brought their elders with them, and initially one of the programming extended because you had elders from different cultures who had no place to go because they had moved here to be with their children, but they were isolated at home. So the Bellevue Community Center, that is really a great model. But once again, they had a dedicated space. I think that's the biggest challenge for Sammamish, is there's not a dedicated space or an obvious dedicated space to have a senior/community center. I know that a vibrant senior center would also want to include a vibrant arts component to it, because and that's lacking in Sammamish as well, across all age. And I know there's an arts commission, but the opportunities once again for art in Sammamish are limited for adults and older adults. You have a little bit more options with youth because there is dedicated youth programming.
Redmond is moving similarly to what Bellevue is. Redmond lost its senior center to the building having to be torn down.
Yeah.
And the city went through a year's study, and the council has approved a $52 million new senior/community center in the same place that the old one was, near the city hall and the police department. And it has a left-hand entrance for the seniors, and it has a right one for the community, and it's phenomenal. It almost looks like the one in Mercer Island, which is run by.
Redmond, it was old and out of code.
Yeah. When we had the old library discussion back, 15 years ago in Sammamish, and what was going to be happening to the old one, the Boys and Girls Club did approach the city to take it on for a senior center because they were working out of modules up in Redmond. And the plan at the time, and I was part of Boys and Girls Club at the time, was that it would be senior center by school day, and after school day, it would be come the children. And it hasn't worked that way. In some cases, in some communities, the Boys and Girls Club also does childcare by day. So when children are in the facility, adults cannot be in the facility. And that's still true now. So if we wanted to use the Boys and Girls Club Teen Center in Sammamish, we could do it when it's not going to be used for kids. So it cannot be used when school vacations are there, the summer camp program is there, the early release there is there, and it follows the Lake Washington School District's calendar. And of course, this past year, the Teen Center was used for several, I think it was about 30 kids were in there for online schooling. They were just there by day, and that was a special program. So of course, nobody else could be using it. And if you want to use the Teen Center now, there's quite a list of requirements and cleaning and numbers of people and what you can and can't do. And so it's not a viable choice the way the contract reads, the lease for the city. Any more questions on this section? A vibrant community, we can age in place.
Well, this is sort of really not totally related, but before we, I don't know how long your meetings usually go, but I just wanted to make sure that we looked at the task of disaster preparedness for older adults, because I think they're going to be one of the most vulnerable groups in our community if we have a major disaster. And I would like to see if there's some way that, through the city, I'm registered on a lot of different things, and I'm assuming that if there's a major disaster that I'll get a notification on my cell phone or by email or somehow, I'm going to find out what's happening and what my resources are. The groups that are isolated, single people who live alone, who are not socialized, I'm really concerned about that group of people, that they don't know, won't know where to go, who to contact. So anyway, I just want to throw that out for you guys to put on your list of things. And, many of us can be helpful. Linda can be helpful from her group. We can be helpful from Sammamish seniors. Vicki probably same thing. We would all be able to contribute and collaborate on making sure that we stay in touch with that vulnerable group in our community.
I think the cooling centers was an experience for us all in June because the word got out by email. It got out by, primarily if you wanted to look up something, you'd have to go on your computer to be able to look it up somewhere. And you weren't getting the information like turning to the Sammamish 540 radio AM station there, or getting it through, let's say, those automatic calls that Puget Sound Energy will give you if something is out and when it's going to be back and where you can go in the meanwhile. Yeah, there's a lot of things that the communities all around us learned at that time. Others? Thank you to the YMCA for being open. What are you doing to ensure seniors from all communities, such as the immigrants, the refugees, LGBT, and others, are aware of the services your organizations provide? How do you get your word out? Anybody?
Yeah, I don't know that we do. I know that they're focused on that, for sure. I know they have a welcoming week where they invite people in from, other countries and things that don't necessarily even speak English and kind of work with them along those lines. There's a lot of work to be done for sure.
When we started Sammamish Seniors, we were able actually to meet at the Boys and Girls Club because the India Association of Western Washington invited us to come under their umbrella. And so we were so grateful to them. And, I think they're a very vibrant part of our community. And I think, we need to reach out everyone. I mean, there's no exclusion to be part of Sammamish Seniors, except, if you're 30, you probably, but, we had some volunteers who were young, who wanted to come and be with seniors, especially families who perhaps didn't have family in the area. It was a way for them to connect. Mm. So yeah, I think, important to reach out to everyone.
Rich?
Yeah, hi. I was wondering, are you working with some of the churches? I know that Sammamish has a diverse, not in churches, even some of the religious, groups to see how they can help, whether they can offer either services or, even places to meet. Is this something that you're looking at? It's just a thought, but.
Well, of course, right now, everything is that safe distancing.
Right. Yeah,
continues.
exactly.
We approached the Mary Queen of Peace back in February of 2020, knowing that we would have to be moving out of the teen center when the schools were dismissed in June. And to use, let's say, the Marion room, as you walk right in the door on the left, there's that big room off to the side. And it has a commercial kitchen. We could do our coffee and all kinds of things like that. It would be one large room with a very large AV system. And it wouldn't have the ping pong table and the pool tables that the teen center had. We'd all have to be doing the same thing because there's no division. It's everybody would be doing fitness at the same time or playing bingo at the same time, or you wouldn't be playing bridge because you wouldn't have the concentration. You wouldn't be able to talk at a table and do your knitting because there would be the loudness of happening whatever else there. But it never came to fruition because COVID just closed down everything. There are things that various churches are doing. Of course, the Vedic Center is active. The Muslim group through MAPS is active. The Sammamish Presbyterian churches were doing the senior lunches on Tuesdays once a month. Activities, for seniors, but not part of the Sammamish seniors. And, when, even I'm thinking back to when Red Cross wants to have disaster shelter agreements with facilities that have commercial kitchens or showers and enough restrooms and all like that. The big deal is fine, as long as not the Alcoholics Anonymous is going to meet there, or not because we're going to have a funeral coming up, or not because we have these Sunday services. You can't leave your stuff there. Whatever you want to bring in, such as at the teen center, you take out that same day. There's no storage. There's no sacred space for seniors. There is the Piggott property coming up, the third parcel. There is the possibility of the barn for seniors. It was discussed with the Parks Department several years ago. And I think the mayor is interested in considering that as a senior center interim. There's also the house, there's also other things there. But, maybe the town center will have one someday.
Just a question, is Central Washington full?
They are concentrating on having full-time classes and still are, they have the Y renting space in that, but you can't really use the gym. The same thing as it's one room.
I was just wondering the way, because it was configured as a church originally, and I don't know if they've done a lot of work, and I haven't been in to other than the gym to see, but I was just curious if they are filled with students at this point or had
They
some
seem
extra
to
space.
be very heavily.
Okay, well, that's good.
In fact, I heard rumor that the Microsoft special parking was not going to be happening this year.
Oh, really? Oh,
Because they wanted to be to have enough space for the student parking.
wow. Okay.
I don't know if that has come through or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked immigrants, we talked refugees, and we try to get the word out to as many people as we can. Linda, how do people learn about what Eastside Friends of Seniors is and does?
Yeah, so Eastside Friends of Seniors, we don't do a whole lot of advertising because we are a small organization. So people find us via families. Word of mouth is our number one. Other service providers, from referrals from social workers at medical clinics, those type of things. And when we have a client who English is not their first language, or they have very limited English, we do try and match them with a volunteer who speaks the same language. So in our telephone buddy program that we started as a response to the social isolation, we were quite successful in matching some clients with a telephone buddy who spoke the native language. And so, but there was a lot of work to be done. I'll be the first to tell you that we are not saturating the diverse communities that Sammamish and Issaquah have to the extent they have. We had a client that we were serving in, well, this one was in Issaquah, but basically their daughter would send us information. We would provide it to the daughter, who would text her mother, right? And then that was how the communication happened. It was a family member who lived far away who was kind of the intermediary, because we didn't have a for what they needed intermittent transportation. We did not have a specific volunteer that we could just assign to them. So sometimes we had a volunteer that spoke the correct language, but sometimes, you know, that volunteer wasn't available and they needed to go to the doctor at a certain day or time. So that is an area, I think, of growth for the Y, for us, for all service providers. And one of those challenges, we do live in, like I said, a very diverse community, and we want to make sure that the needs of seniors are being met, even when, you know, there's a barrier of language.
I think one of the questions here, Sammamish has many long-term senior visitors, particularly from other countries. How can we ensure they are connected to services? Just getting the word out, that marketing, the newspapers that we don't have.
Well, I think you have to work with the business community.
And that's a really challenging situation.
And that's a really
I think it's not just for immigrant families. I think it's for all families. And I'm wondering, I don't know the answer to this question. Is there a place in the city of Sammamish where there is housed a resource bank with, you know, if someone calls, the person answering at your front desk says, oh, yes, let me give you, I can email you, text you, whatever, give you the URL for this particular place on the Sammamish website. And when you click there, it will list all of the places that you can get help, resources that are current. And I don't think we have anything like that, do we, at the city of Sammamish?
So Chair Bottenberg, that's a great question. Prior to COVID, we had redesigned the literature distribution at the city. Before, you had to go right up to the front desk, which was a long walkway. So we designed an area right as you came in through the first doors, where we had lots of different information from different nonprofits. And then also, if anyone calls up the city, the reception folks do have numbers and names of organizations they can refer to, and if they're not sure, they always put them through to human services. So I always undoubtedly get the call, so we always make sure there's a soft handover to another organization or you know, or whatever help they need.
Sure.
I do want to caution against spending resources to duplicate something that already exists, because you can call 211 and they utilize language translation services. And so, and the nice thing is that it's throughout the state of Washington, right? So there are multiple 211 call centers, and the one in King County is run out of the crisis clinic, or crisis connection that's out there. I believe they have the contract for the 211. So you both have local resources. You also have crisis resources that readily available should that need be, regardless of age. And like I said, they have language capabilities. It is very time consuming to duplicate resource information. The crisis clinic, they have staff that are dedicated just to keeping the resource list updated. And so it's a challenge, having worked in that system, having created different things before and the different organizations I have worked. But it's nice that because you can also look up 211 online and put in the information you need. But if you want to talk to someone, they can help people triage. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
you for that. It's a good reminder that you know, it's a one-stop shop, and maybe we need to feature that at, you know, in the publication, you know, the newsletter that comes out from the city, or put it in a headline banner, you know, on the city website, or, you know, just occasionally, you know, keep reminding people that 211 is there.
And they do connect with senior-specific organizations, and they do warm handoffs when people need more intensive older adult information.
Questions on this one? Okay. Can you give us some examples of how you collaborate with other organizations?
We're trying. The Seniors is trying.
Yeah, the Member Seniors includes the links to the other cities' senior center activities in the association as well. And we keep listing the resources of the 211 and the social worker with the physical food and clothing bank that's available to all to ask questions on who, what, when, and where.
You don't have anything like that.
Because we do more social service kinds of activities, we collaborate a lot with our local providers, with other senior serving organizations. Joyce, you just mentioned that Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank. We do a lot of collaboration with them to make sure that folks have access to food. We collaborate with Sound Generation. So if we have a client that has needs that extend beyond what we can do, we often connect with them to be able. So we'll do this if you can handle this part of it. So those kinds of things. There are so many different, so many different things that we have our scope of what we do. And so we have to be able to do that collaboration with other organizations. So we have we're very fortunate that in general, King County is a very caring community.
What didn't we ask you that you want to tell us? What should we have asked?
Let me tell you, so some of the things that I want to share are things that are not necessarily within the purview of the human service, but their commission and the city per se, but they're public policy issues that really came to light during COVID. Number one is that folks who are on basic food, aka food stamps. Most of the programs require that the person goes in person to utilize their food benefit. There is not a provision, for instance, an organization such as ours who could be eligibilized to act on behalf of a client. And we had some struggles with food security, especially early on when there was already, if people ordered, even people who had access to food online, you could not use your basic food benefit to go pick up your groceries from Safeway, or it was too long a wait. So we did a lot of collaboration with the food bank in particular to make sure that people were food secure. And so there was extra money given to folks on basic food, but if you can't access the food, and like I said, I was not in a position to allow our volunteers to be able to use it because, one misappropriation could take down our organization. It was very, very stressful. And we know that people's family and friends most likely did that. So that was so food security was made more difficult, and that came to light. The second piece that is happening, that's actually a bigger public policy issue, is a huge issue for seniors in Sammamish who are low income and who start to have medical care needs or home care needs, is that when the state has a program that allows you to apply for Medicaid, and then Medicaid will recapture some of the benefits paid out, but the maximum value of your house is $633,000. Guess what? Nobody's house in Sammamish is worth only $633,000. We literally had a client who was in the hospital for 3 months. They thought they had gotten her eligibilized. They sent her home. And within hours, they said, oh, we made a mistake. And they pulled her home care. So I talked to the folks at AARP. They said it's not only an issue in our community, King County in general, but it's starting to become an issue like in Spokane. So, so this is a huge, like I said, that's a bigger policy issue. In terms of services that are not available to seniors that could be fulfilled by a senior center, and something that came to light after the senior centers, local senior centers have not been available to seniors, is that things that we take for granted, like the ability to cut our own toenails. So most senior centers have some sort of a podiatry program where seniors they'd go into the senior center and they'd have their nails done, particularly critical with people who have multiple health issues. And that's an issue for seniors who are pretty homebound and don't have, who are accessing that program, like through one of our local senior centers. And Sammamish, that's, our Sammamish seniors. So that's so there's little things all over the place. So I could talk on and on, but those are some key things I wanted to highlight today.
And one of the things that I think that I've seen happen all over the country is that the local hospitals typically host an older adults fair, but we don't have a hospital in Sammamish. And I'm wondering if that's something perhaps the city can use some volunteers who love organizing events, maybe, in combination with a farmer's market or some other kind of community event, to have an older adults fair where, we could invite those providers who provide home care, the providers who give information about access to food and property tax deferment. And, they've been extremely successful in other communities. And I think that that would be a great service that we could think about doing in the future, so that seniors, elders, older adults, however you want to label us, that we would have access and information that we needed when we face a crisis. I mean, 211 is great, But just knowing how to proactively plan ahead can be a great stress reliever for older adults.
Vicki,
And seniors typically like to participate in those kind of activities where they can go out and meet people face to face and learn more about a program. Yeah.
We had one a couple of years ago at the Y. I'll bring that up again because that went over really well.
Right.
I don't know if it was exactly the providers that you're speaking of now, but it was towards that age group, more our active older adults, not necessarily upper age, but it went really well and they were happy to come out. And so I will pass that along.
That would be great, Vicki. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jody?
I have a few follow-up questions. One is, it sounds like you all use a lot of volunteers for your programming. And I'm just wondering, do you guys have enough volunteers from the community? Are there more need for volunteers? That's my first question.
We have an ad that we just put together because we need a volunteer who can help us with marketing, communications, and newsletters. We're running ragged on the volunteer end here. So Joyce, has that ad gone into the city of Sammamish?
No, it is into the seniors so far.
Maybe we should put it on the Sammamish volunteer site. Seeking volunteers.
So volunteers are really important. We have a very caring community. One thing that that people tend to forget is that for the most part, volunteers are not free. That you need to have a certain amount of infrastructure to be able to manage volunteers. In terms of when you are utilizing volunteers with people who may be in an at-risk population, there needs to be kind of screening processes and safety issues. So I think it's really important as we think volunteers, they are the answer. I mean, there are primary service providers, but there is a misunderstanding that volunteers are not free, and
they need a lot of supervision.
Yeah. So.
Well, and I think in Sammamish we have access to a lot of older adults who have highly regarded skills that could be used.
Absolutely.
And when I worked for the National Council on Aging, we called them volunteers of significant service. They did not want to lick envelopes. They weren't those kind of volunteers. They wanted to really get to the meat of what was happening and make a difference and volunteer where their skill sets matched the needs.
So true.
So Linda, do you have enough volunteers I'm sure you have, a core of volunteer drivers, a core of volunteers.
So you know what, it's an ongoing process because our volunteers come and go. And they come and go as sometimes they become our clients. A lot of our volunteers are older folks. And actually I'm going to go visit with one of our longtime volunteers who has a cancer diagnosis and now is going to need to go for treatment. And so she's going to switch from being a volunteer to being a client. And so people's situations change. So it's an ongoing process. We recruit constantly. So we can always, especially volunteer drivers or volunteers who want to help a little bit in the home, who can vacuum behind the couch or something, or it's hard to vacuum when you use a walker, and things like that. So that's I will tell you that there's never enough volunteers, and but we're very fortunate with the volunteers we have, but we're always recruiting volunteers.
And then the other question I had has to do with these public policy questions. Do you guys, I would doubt if you have access to lobbyists, but I'm just wondering if you guys tap into, how do you do your advocacy around policy issues? Do you do it on your own? You work with ARP and collaborate? How does that work?
Yeah, we definitely don't have our own lobbyists. We definitely collaborate with other organizations who are doing policy work and support their efforts. Yeah, it's and I think that will be something as the Sammamish seniors get going. When you talk about people who have lots to give, that's going to be one area that will be an opportunity to tap some interest and expertise. So yeah, as a small organization, I have no public policy opportunities other than ringing the bell and being willing to visit with legislators, which I am because I'm the needs of our constituents. So
yeah, it's great that you're able to do that. Sally, did you, or Vicki, did you guys have anything to say on the policy issues?
Well, I can just add that, one of the great ways for any organization working with older adults is to be aware of the national organizations that represent us, the agencies on aging. There's an agency on aging in every county, in every state in the United States. And so, just making sure that we connect with our local and as nonprofits or wannabe nonprofits, maybe someday, or part of a city, being connected to those organizations, knowing how to effectively advocate for those things that you believe need to happen. Just a reminder that, there are people out there, we just need to connect with them. I'm constantly contacting my congressmen and senators, and it doesn't really take very many voices to have people listen.
Which is a great point. The King County Area and Agency is very politically, historically is politically active. And I don't know if we have had a representative from Sammamish. There have been a couple from Issaquah, including a former mayor. And so I think we want to make sure that when there's openings that we look for candidates that could represent our community. I think thank you for bringing that up. That's a really great point. And yeah. So
we always have to remember that as nonprofits, it's illegal for us to lobby, but we can advocate.
Yes.
Nonprofits can lobby a little bit, an insubstantial amount, but
advocate.
So, but yeah, we can advocate a lot of advocacy.
A lot of that, yes.
The final thing I just was curious about in this time of COVID was, are seniors open to meeting outdoors? When you talked about having a fair, like a farmer's market, that would, something outdoors, I know that with COVID, and particularly with the Delta variant now and being so highly transmissible, I would assume that'd be some concern. But earlier on, was there interest for outdoor, gathering in person, or was that something that was just thought of as too risky?
There was a camp that was offered. Joyce, I don't remember the name of the camp. There was a camp that was offered for older adults, and they canceled it because only 4 people volunteered.
Terry.
Yeah, that was Camp Terry. Yeah, I was signed up to go because I always thought that'd be a great outing for them. But the crew I work with has been meeting outdoors for quite a while now. They bring their own chairs and they bring their own drink and they sit in a big circle, and
nice.
So it's important to them, but they're keeping safe at the same time, which is good.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering my questions.
I do think because people are more vaccinated, that they're more willing to do outdoor things, but we'll have to see how the variant plays out.
Other questions? Anybody? Jan, you're too quiet. Well, our panel of senior providers, thank you so much for being with us. Keep us informed.
This was
Public-
interesting.
Always welcome. Writing or in person. In person, like speaking at the moment. Hey, Rita, when do we get back into City Hall?
That has not yet been determined.
Okay. We can move on to the next agenda item, and our panel of senior providers can stay or not. The next item is, in fact, let's see, carry forward grant funding discussion.
Thank you to all of you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
for
much.
having us.
Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
much.
I appreciate it. And, you know, I'm going to be going to the benefitscheckup.org as soon as we get off.
Wonderful. Thanks for having us. I have a lot going on, so I'm going to say thank you. It was great to meet all of you, and best wishes on the rest of your agenda.
Thanks, Ellie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Who's going to lead us in the
Okay.
discussion of carry forward grant funding discussion? Lisa.
Rita,
Mike,
do you want me to
Mike,
kick this
shall
one
I-
off?
Yes, absolutely. I can or you can, whatever. Yes.
I'll start, and you can add in anything I might have missed here.
Perfect.
So we don't have a ton of time here, just wanted to plant the seed in the commission's brain. You might remember back in the budget process, we had requested a carry forward of unspent grant funds from 2020 into 2021, and that was for $54,000. Council ended up approving that, so it's in our current year 2021 budget, and that's available for us to re-grant in a way that the commission sees fit. So we don't really, Rita and I talked about it, and we don't have a lot of parameters to put on it. It's really up for discussion here at the commission. A couple things to note. The first is that it doesn't necessarily have to be COVID related. It's not emergency COVID funding. It's just general grant funding. So it can essentially go to anything that we would normally fund in our biennial grant program. And two, while it is in our current year 2021 budget, we are pretty close to the end of the year now, and it's unlikely we'll be distributing it this year, but I see a very high likelihood that we could move it from 21 into 22. So as far as timeline goes for using the funds, I would tentatively say that we'd have until the end of next year to use the funds that we end up granting out. So I know we've had a lot of panel discussions here as part of the commission, and you all know best, and you've heard a lot from different sectors of our community. And so in kind of thinking about how we, formulate our approach to this sort of one-off, one-time grant funding source, rather than kind of put it out widely as part of a request for proposals, we thought maybe we take a more targeted approach and open it up to the commission to let us know, out of all the areas that we've heard from so far, where do you see the greatest need? And then, with that kind of loose direction in mind, Rita and I can go out to our nonprofits and, kind of work with them to develop proposals for, the best use of the funds. So that's kind of what we were thinking of is, the commission just gives us general guidance on areas they see a need in or interested in. Then we go out and we work with the providers to get some proposals going. And before I see Jody's hands up, Rita, was there anything I missed as part of that brief intro?
No, I think that was great. So I think what we really want to do is just get some guidance from you guys as commissioners. And that's what we're hoping to get, some feedback and guidance from you this evening.
I'm wondering about the infrastructure of our human services in the city, whether it's something that we should be putting into paper and marketing as far as how to learn where to go and what to do. Handouts, banners, or more staffing for Rita. Rita, what's happening with the other nearby cities and their human services staff?
As in a general, well, I think, every city is unique, and everyone's staffing model is unique. So yeah.
I would say, as far as like internal, I would say let's focus probably more on externally. We do have a little bit of budget in the Human Services Department if we wanted to do some, mailings or flyers like we did for those emergency COVID resources. I would see this funding as more for services like nonprofit type grants.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do we have to have, like, we can, the commissioner can give some recommendations and guidance in what areas, but do we have, if they're current grantees, do we really have to make them do another proposal, or can we just have them do an extension of, an amendment to their contract or an extension? Just 54,000 is not a lot of money, and if we're going to be spreading it over more than 1 or 2 organizations, it's not going to be a big grant. I would really not want to make them jump through that kind of hoop if it's possible, but just wondering.
And so, I think Mike and I have spoken about this, and again, it's the will of the commission. But if we are going to try, trusted community partners, as you say, it's not a whole lot of money, and to make them go through the whole rigmarole of filling out an extensive application. Yes, but again, Mike and I can kind of come back with you guys with some options, some ideas. But yeah.
Right.
I think we need Rita and others to tell us what's happening as far as the moratorium gone now for evictions, and what our local providers are able to do or not, or what else is out there.
So that's a great question, and I'll quickly talk to that very quickly. And that was part of my staff report. So we've reached out to all the rental assistance providers, and what we found is that their request for services is actually decreased. When anybody is going to a rental assistance provider, St. Vincent de Paul, Hopelink, or Issaquah Community Services, they're first asking them to go to the King County Eviction Prevention program. What is it called? The King County Eviction Prevention and Rental Assistance Program, the EPRAP program. The problem there is that we're seeing a lot of gaps right now. So King County has a ton of money, but they've only actually issued 5% of their actual total allocation. So there's a lot of people that are still waiting to hear. So it's interesting. So we're seeing a decrease in overall requests from rental assistance providers, only because they're pushing them out to King County. And because of the bureaucratic delays, a lot of people haven't found out whether they've got any funding yet.
So are our providers saying that they prefer to do it that way, or are they saying this is getting tied up in King County, so we want to give them money direct? Is that's not what they're saying?
No, I think that's what they're saying. I think they just think, King County is a mothership of money, and that they will then catch the ones that don't get allocations from King County, and that there'll be people that will be just about, that maybe just don't quite qualify. So that's their hope. So again, I know we've been saying this for months now, Mike and I, it is a little bit of a wait and see approach, and we're still waiting and seeing. And our hope is that there's been a big spotlight on King County, and so I know they're trying to go gangbusters and get their systems in place. So hopefully we'll be hearing more money coming into the system sooner rather than later.
Stan, have a question?
I do. I'm sorry I got bumped off. So have we, I know we haven't, looked at anything in the drug and alcohol recovery area, which would kind of fall under our mental health issues? No?
So, okay, no, this is great. I mean, even you guys sort of giving us some parameters. I mean, Mike and I are happy to sort of sort of hear this and then, you know, brainstorm, speak with providers, figure out where there are gaps, and then so okay, so I'm hearing drug and alcohol area.
Yeah, I had a nonprofit that my neighbor was raising funds for, and I checked into it, and I donated some money to them because it's kind of it's not just, you know, an AA meeting. They actually go out and do events and change the mindset of people and give them something to do, get their mind off of drugs and alcohol and put them back into family and community and, you know, self-worth issues. So, I mean, I know there's organizations out there like that, and I know the issue exists in Sammamish, especially with COVID and people getting locked up in their houses and, you know, not being able to physically go out and work for a long time. I know drug and alcohol increased from all the studies we've seen. So it's just something to consider.
Terry, I'd like to ask you, you're leaving us. What are your insights?
My thought is, I mean, I understand, Stan makes a good point. I suspect, however, if we were to look at all of our areas, seniors, youth, whatever, we will see increased needs across the board. Given that we're talking about not a huge amount of money, $50,000, my thought is, I certainly agree with Jody that we should not make all of the organizations jump through hoops, which has a cost to them in terms of submitting grants. My thought is to just do some sort of a pro rata application and just look at who we granted money to in our last go round, and then so for example, if the Issaquah Food Bank got 10% of the money that we allocated, and I don't even know if that number is anywhere close, they get 10% of the $50,000, and that way everybody that we gave a grant to would get something. They might not get very much in some cases, but they would get something. We wouldn't necessarily put strings on it, basically saying, look, we have this extra money, here it is. If you need, apply it where you think the need is the most. If your need is to help increase your what you're paying your people, that's fine. And just leave it up to them. I just think that in light of the amount of money we're talking about, that we should not be creating a lot of hoops that the organizations have to jump through.
I agree. Good point.
Yeah, so
I agree.
I agree that we should do just general operating dollars, meaning no program dollars. But I was thinking that we might want to look at the grants that we made and which ones we cut and offered less than they asked for, because we thought that we were worthy enough to give them, but because that, as I recall, as we were making those decisions, we were trying to make a budget, and so we're like, okay, let's give this one, instead of 10, let's give this one 7. And so I'm wondering if we should make up the ones that we cut just because we thought they were worthy, but we just didn't have enough money to give them a full grant, and look at those first.
Yeah, it would be, I think that's a very good point. It'd be interesting if, and Rita and Mike, perhaps you could just throw another rock into your pack. If you could figure out what the total amount of the ask versus what was given, and what does that total to, and then maybe we could focus the $50,000 there. I mean, that would be a reasonable, I think, decision, as I think doing it on a pro rata basis would be reasonable, which would not require a lot of hoops for organizations to jump through. And we could just simply say, you asked for $5,000, we gave you $3,000, we've had this extra money, here's the additional $2,000.
So what
But I don't know what that number
Commissioner Hall,
was. I suspect it would be more than $50,000.
so Commissioner Hall, so what I'm hearing is that you want to kind of peanut butter spread it rather than target it. This is what I'm hearing from you guys. Like, you know, you'd rather, you want like, well, we could at least look and give you like numbers and at the next meeting. And
I don't necessarily want to peanut butter
Yeah.
spread.
Yeah.
I think we should target it at the ones that we thought were worthy.
Yeah.
okay.
Instead, we wanted to fund, but we just didn't have enough money to fund the full request. I don't necessarily think we should give funds to ones we didn't think were worthy. We didn't fund them, so now we're going to fund them.
Yeah.
No, and I'm not
Because
suggesting that. I'm only suggesting that we give the money to the organizations that we actually funded.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Do we take our evaluation of performance into consideration? You know, did they do what they said they were going to do?
Rita would be probably have all that top of head.
I'm so sorry. First of all, I thought I was on mute and I was busy eating a plantain chip, so I apologize. So that's a great question. Commissioner Gano, so even though we like allocate money to organizations, the reason why we have this 54,000 going forward is because certain organizations don't, you know, they are not able to deliver their service units. So my sense is that you would want to maybe perhaps give it to organizations that, one, we already currently fund, two, that are fulfilling their service units, and maybe we didn't fully fund them at their original ask. I don't know. Is that reasonable, or?
So ones that are not
Well,
performing their service units,
yeah,
do we, even though, you know, we funded them, do we take them out of the additional funding?
I would, that again is up to the will of the commission. You know, if they're not fulfilling their service units right now, do you want to give them extra money for us to not give them that money? Or do you want to give it to the ones that perhaps are already, like, you know, fulfilling their deliverables already, and funding them, we just fund them at their full ask? Again, it's the will of the commission, you know, it's
So Rita, another thing I would suggest is that besides like looking at organizations that are fulfilling their service units and had requested significant funding, but we really had to cut corners, so we, you know, cut the funding. We should look at those organizations, but then another criteria should be, you know, if an organization is not receiving, is a credible organization is doing great work, but is not receiving funding from multiple sources. Like the 211s, you know, those types of services receive a lot of funding across board. Organizations that are not receiving funding from multiple sources, and it could just be that they are more indigenous community organizations, smaller organizations, you know, that are not in the, you know, that funders maybe do not typically fund, but they're doing great work.
right.
We should be using those organizations.
So I love so what I'm hearing from you is that give it to an organization that's maybe homegrown, smaller, that really is relying on our funding, as opposed to where we say to an organization, oh, you have 15,000, and they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. You know,
yes,
like,
but has a track record of doing great work too, you know, so there are those types of organizations.
Yeah. Okay.
They will really benefit from that funding.
Sure. Okay. No, this is great. So this is great. Like, I think, like, you know, we went from let's give it to organizations that have applied to let's give it to organizations that we've already given funding to, that we didn't fully fund, but that are still, you know, doing their deliverables, but that would really, really benefit from this funding because they don't have like copious amounts of funding sources. Okay. No, this is great. Okay.
One of the things that I was going to say, just to add on to what Nishina was saying, is that we talked about in our process, some of the organizations are too small to have like a big grant grant writing arm or be sophisticated enough to get to that type of funding, but are doing the work on the ground. And I think we heard that when we had the Asian community, resource center. It's like those types of organizations. We could, if we could target some of those too, I think that would be good.
You got your homework?
Thank you. Yes, no, this is great. Thank you. So this is great information for Mike and I. Yeah, so that's great. Thank you.
Thanks for doing that work, that analysis.
Is that your staff report too?
I've just got a couple of things for staff report. It will be short and sweet, I promise. So we currently fund the Landing, which is a Friends of Youth program in Redmond, and it's the homelessness shelter for youth and young adults. And what they've had to do, they've had to close it for a few weeks because they've had a few positive COVID cases amongst youth, and also Friends of Youth are having a really hard time with staff retention. So they suspended operations. They said they were out for 2 weeks, and now we just got an email saying that their original return date of September the 8th is not feasible, so they bumped that out even more. So their biggest challenge really is recruiting, hiring, and retaining staff, and we're hearing this from lots of nonprofits, but particularly the homeless nonprofits, like providers, nonprofits. It's just the particular pressure of the work that they do, compounded with COVID and health implications, and so there's a lot of problems with staff retention across the board with homelessness providers. I have other things, but I will bump that to the next meeting. But I think we need a big shout out to Commissioner Hall, who is going to be leaving us. Commissioner Hall, you were onboarded in February 2020. You had 2 in-person meetings, and then you were bumped into the world of virtual COVID reality and meetings. And Mike and I are just so very grateful for like what a year to be a commissioner. I bet you were like, I want to run the other direction, but really, I mean, just reviewing grants and then listening to like COVID updates and all this virtual meetings, and I think we've just so benefited from your great wisdom relating to Friends of Youth, and we've so enjoyed having you, and we're going to miss you.
Well, I'm going to miss you all. Thank you, and thank you very much, Rita. I very much appreciate those comments. This was my wife and I have lived up here. We've lived in this house for 30 years, and this was sort of sudden, frankly, that we had this opportunity to move to Corvallis, where my daughter and her family live, and it was an opportunity that we didn't see coming up again. I'm going to really miss you all. I'm going to miss the work that you do. As I said in the email, the passion that people bring here is impressive. I think that the city and the council are well served by you all in making them realize that parks and fixing the roads and zoning issues and planning issues, those are all very important. We all know that. But there are other important issues that the people of Sammamish face, particularly in a rapidly changing demographics here on the plateau. It's something that I've seen dramatically for the better for the last 30 years. But I'm going to miss you all, and good work and good luck going forward.
Terry, if Corvallis does not have a commission, you need to start one. And I do appreciate everything you've done for us, for, gosh, over a year now. I really do. I appreciate your input.
It was shorter than I anticipated. I will be cutting. I'm not going to be retiring completely. but my wife chuckles every time she hears me say it, but I will be cutting back significantly. And I remember there was it was on NPR, he was 101 years old and he had published his first book. And he made the comment, he said, you don't retire from something, you retire to something. And so, yeah, both my wife and I are excited. My wife and I spent a couple of years in Afghanistan when we were Peace Corps volunteers. So one thing that we want to look at is how we can work with the Afghan refugee community, which is an issue that's near and dear to our hearts. So anyway, thank you again. I appreciate the kind comments.
Thanks, Terry. Really, really appreciate you. Are you going to be practicing law? Do you have?
Yes, I tell people that I'm open. My law firm has offices all over the place, and I tell them I'm going to be opening the Corvallis office, which is going to be located in my den. So I've still got a number of clients and colleagues that I'm sort of transitioning the work to, and for better or worse, I just know a lot of stuff in what I do that I want to make sure that that's available. But the real intention is to cut back and make life miserable for my daughter and son-in-law as we spoil their two kids.
We wish you well. Thank you so much.
I think their two kids are going to find out learn very quickly that they now have, not only can they play mom off against dad, now they can play grandma and grandpa off against their parents. So we're going to be
That's what grandparents are for.
Yep.
You bet.
Enjoy
it.
Take care. Good luck.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry.
Thank you. Well, we have 1 minute. Do we have commissioner reports?
I've got something real quick I wanted to share. I was out of pocket for a little while. I went to Florida for a Disabled American Vets Convention at the beginning of August. And lo and behold, even though I was vaccinated, I got COVID. Luckily, it wasn't real bad, but I'm finally getting back my sense of smell and getting back in the swing of things. So even though you're vaccinated, you're still not 100%. So be careful out there when you're in crowds and in groups. Nobody who was in my group got it except for lucky me. And I brought it for my wife, which she loved me for. So be careful, guys.
Oh no, how is Karma doing, Stan?
She's great. Worked on my honeydew list.
Okay. Oh goodness.
How long did you have the symptoms, Stan?
We were isolated for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Just to make sure, and went out and got retested and everything was fine. We were concerned because when we got back, we were having a barbecue, and I was like, I was in Florida, I'm going to get tested. So I kept my distance from everybody, at the family barbecue, got the results back, and talk about getting a damper on a barbecue really quick is when you tell them you got COVID, even though you weren't, anywhere close to them. So, but it wasn't bad. It was kind of like a flu. I took some NyQuil and slept a lot, lost my sense of smell. Karma lost her smell and taste, and hers was like a bad cold. So, not bad at all. I'm alive and well.
Good.
Yeah.
So, be careful, guys. In groups.
Yeah.
That's why when I see the baseball games and everything, I'm like, God, put on a mask. It's going to help.
Any other business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Jody, okay.
I'll second it.
I guess we can say that we'll probably have a unanimous vote here. Okay, the motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All
Um,
those in favor?
I do have something for discussion. Our next meeting is October 13th, and the topic is to be determined.
Oh,
Are you
and
going to
thank
do
you
that,
so much
Joyce
for-
and staff?
So Commissioner Gunnar, so we are going to be getting a date, so we will have a joint Human Services Commission meeting in October. We still don't know when. It's obviously going to be virtual. So as soon as we find that information, we will pass that on to folks.
Thank
but
you.
We're still trying, yeah.
Okay.
Sweet. Call the question.
Okay, all those in favor of adjournment,
Aye.
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 which is unanimous.
Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Best
Good
of
night.
luck, Terry.
Bye, Terry.
Take care.
Thank you all
Bye.
again.
Everybody.
Bye.
Good luck.
It'd be cheaper
Bye-bye.
though.
What?
I said it'd be less expensive over there.
Yeah, except that they have an income tax. And my
Well,
wife keeps telling
don't
me,
work.
yeah, but they don't have any sales tax. And I say, it's not a wash.
So do like me and just
well, I'll just
retire.
have to buy more stuff.
Oh, yeah. That works.
You furnish,
All right,
right?
everybody. Thanks, Terry. Good luck, buddy.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you all.
Bye.
Bye, guys.